Welcome. It's time to go into the mistakes that are killing your offers. Worse yet, well, in more accurate terms, they're destroying the offers of your clients. At the end of the day, you're going to live to see another day, ideally, right? But it's your clients. They're the ones that are suffering from not getting their offers accepted. So I need to preface, before we get into it, I need to preface what this is going to look like. So I'm going to go into mistakes, not into every single little mistake that exists on known to man, because there's a billion of them. I'm going to preface this with, you have a client that can realistically get offers accepted, meaning you have a client that realistically has the funds, has the motivation, wants to get a deal done, but it's mistakes that we as real estate agents make that cause the deal not to work out, right? So think back to, if you've been in real estate, let's say for 10 years, think back to your first transaction. Think back to your first transaction and see how different that was from your 100th transaction. The difference in confidence, the difference in experience, the difference in know-how. So look at those differences, right? So there's deals that you could save or maybe not have gotten into today than had you from your first transaction, your first year in real estate. So that's what we're going to get into, really trying to accelerate any mistakes out there that we're going to be making that are avoidable. So that's the mistakes that I want to discuss today. So number one is overpricing the offer, and really on the other end, underpricing the offer. So let me zoom in here so we can get a little bit closer look on this. All right, that's about as close as I can get. All right, so when we're looking at the offers, we're overpricing the offers. So things that are going to get your offers not accepted. So same way that we could overprice it, same thing that we could do. Let me rephrase that. On the other side of things, there's such a thing as underpricing it, but I think we knew that, right? So if we don't offer enough or substantially enough, whenever we're trying to get under contract, the likelihood of that offer getting accepted is low. But the same thing can happen on the other extremes. If we have a home that's for sale at $400,000 and we're offering $500,000, we're overpricing, we're offering so much, that can create the deal. Why? Well, because if there's an experienced real estate agent on the other side of that equation and they see an offer that just doesn't make sense for the property in the conditions that we're in right now, where it's becoming more and more of a buyer's market, they're going to be weary, right? So they're going to say, well, why is this person trying to offer over $100,000 when there's no other competition? There's something here. And what that typically means, if you're an experienced listing agent, you're going to know that, well, yeah, we can get under contract for $1 million if we wanted to. But the challenge is going to be, if they finance the deal, there's going to be an appraisal that comes due in about 2 to 3 weeks from offer getting accepted. So overpricing the offer, believe it or not, can absolutely kill your deal as well. Ignoring your seller's actual priorities. So here you're looking at not taking into account what your seller is looking for. Then this is one of the things that you are, as a real estate agent, need to scope out. I know that you're on the buyer side. You're the one that's bringing an offer. So you can't really communicate with a seller, but you can communicate with the listing agent. You can understand what to do. Let me X out of this real quick. You can understand what to do after you have a conversation with the seller, right? So that's something that you need to be mindful of. Ignoring the seller's actual priorities, what they want to accomplish, what is moving them, is vital. As an example, if you are let's say if your seller is needing 2 weeks after closing because they want to take their time moving. Well, if you are competing against an offer that's maybe offering more but is not willing to concede that to the sellers, and your offer is maybe offering a little bit less but is willing to concede those 2 weeks after closing so the sellers can move with tranquility and peace and not be so rushed, you're going to often find yourselves getting accepted. You're going to get your offers accepted. So ignoring the seller's real priorities is a huge mistake. Having weak financial setup. So what this looks like is, let's go here. Having a weak financial setup essentially is not preparing your client adequately enough. So this happens all the time whenever a client wants to go see a home. And they get so excited, they send you all these properties, and you get all excited because this might be your first transaction or the first one in a while, and you go and show that home. never once actually slowing down to procure a pre-qualification or really understanding if this person can actually qualify. So in your haste, your client does an online application with whatever brokerage out there. I'm not going to throw any mortgage brokerage out there, and they get a pre-qualification letter with very little effort and very little due diligence, only to find out that in reality the home could not, the buyer could actually not make it work, right? So having a weak financial setup, really not preparing your clients adequately enough, is a problem. Now, again, we're going off of the premise that they can actually purchase at a reasonable with a reasonable timeline, with a reasonable terms, if you will. But if your client is maybe not prepared to go up to, let's say, $400,000 and should have been qualified at $350,000, you need to have that information ahead of time, so the finance is just going to fall through. Low earnest and bad option terms. So in Texas, as an example, the interest, the earnest expectation, essentially the deposit, if you will, the earnest expectation is 1% of the value of the home. That's the expectation. It's not a law. It's not a rule. It doesn't have to happen, except it is an expectation. So if you are not putting anything down in earnest and are offering terrible option terms, meaning when you get under contract, you're offering something so low, so weak, so bad with options, meaning you're trying to give your client 2 weeks for the option period and only paying $50 for it. That's a bad term for option. So a standard, very easy to get accepted term for option is 7 days, $100 to $200 for option, so your client can do due diligence. If you're writing bad offers, you're going to get bad results at the end of the day. Asking too much up front. If you try to negotiate the entire transaction, let me rephrase that. If you just try to negotiate everything up front, that is going to be a big downfall for your client. So long before you get into a contract, you're asking for repairs on this, repairs on that, concessions on this, concession on that. That is a big problem. Asking for too much too fast up front is just not going to get your offers accepted. The listing agent's going to see you as unreasonable. The listing agent's going to see this as a bad time. You just met each other. The likelihood of them actually, getting an offer accepted with these situations at play, it's going to end up badly. Incomplete or messy offer packet. Nothing destroys your credibility more than this. Sending over a half-assed filled out contract is just terrible news. Sending over a offer with no pre-qualification, that's terrible news. Filling over a contract with all of the addendums missed. So having an incomplete or messy offer packet is going to destroy your credibility. And from the listing agent's perspective, what they're going to see is, I'm working with an inexperienced real estate agent that is going to not close, right? So if they see the difference of a very well presented offer with all the everything buttoned up the way that it should be versus an offer that is half filled out, just very terrible, and just doesn't work. Well, if they look at the differences there and they get the option of which one I'm going to work with or not, 100 times out of 100 times they're going to work with the one that is filled out correctly, filled out completely, and has not left anything unturned, right? So having an incomplete, again, and messy offer is one of the best ways for you to lose credibility and not get your offer accepted. Back communication with the listing agent. Under no circumstances should the listing agent be hearing from you for the very first time with an offer in their inbox. So what does that mean? You need to have a conversation with the listing agent before you submit an offer. So there's at bare minimum, you're looking at one communication before that happens, but on average, you're going to have spoken to a listing agent twice before you're sending an offer over. So what does that mean? That means that from a listing perspective, let me phrase that. Let's go through an example. That's going to be a better way. With your client, they want to go see a home. They want to go see on 123 Maple Street. They want to go see that home. Well, you as a buyer's agent, you're going to reach out to a listing agent and ask, hey, is this home still available? Right? So is it available? Are you working the offers on this? Is there anything outside of the MLS that has come up that we need to be aware of? asking these questions ahead of time is going to save you a lot of time. Lord forbid you try to schedule a showing and the showing gets approved for whatever reason. You show up only to find out that the contract's that's already been signed for that particular home, meaning that home's no longer available. Right? So again, going back to the example, you should have spoken to or communicated with the listing agent at least once. The second time that you communicate with that listing agent is when you're about to do you're doing your due diligence prior to submitting an offer. So there you are communicating with the listing agent, seeing if there's anything that is important to the seller. So outside of the price, is there anything else that seller is prioritizing right now? That's the question to ask. So again, outside of the price, is there anything else that the seller needs and is looking for at the moment? This will allow you to write a better offer, a stronger offer. So that's already communication number 2. And communication number 3 is letting them know that an offer is coming their way. Right? So again, under no circumstances should the first time that the listing agent knows that you exist is with an offer in their inbox. The reason being is you have an established rapport. Reason being is because you are putting yourself in the same bucket as investors that are commonly sending out lowball offers to listing agents. That's a really good way to get dismissed. And a huge mistake that's going to get your offers rejected is just the buyer dictating everything. Now, here's what this means. Of course, the buyer makes the final call. They're the ones that go through that. But if you have a buyer dictating all of the terms, being unreasonable and just being unruly, that's a good way for the offer not to get accepted. So if the buyer is asking for this concession, this amount in credits, and this offer price, and really the buyer just quarterbacking the entire deal, is it a good way for the offer not to get accepted? That's a really good way for the entire transaction to be cratered. Allowing the buyer to take over everything is a good way for the transaction not to actually close. So these are the top mistakes that are happening right now in the real estate market. If you are a real estate agent that is looking to get offers actually closed, make sure you subscribe to this channel where I'm producing consistent videos on how to actually go through a transaction, how to market yourself, how to grow in your real estate business. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye.